I'm going to tell you the story today about a lady named Helen Keller. Close your eyes and imagine sitting in a dark room with no windows and earmuffs covering your ears so that you cannot hear anything. Imagine that you can't see and you can't hear anything or anyone. Imagine that you can't talk either. Now imagine you've got to stand up and move around this dark and silent room using only your hands and feet to guide you. How would you feel if you had to stay in this room for many years? You'd probably feel startled and frightened by everything and everyone who touched you. You'd probably feel sorry for yourself and frustrated or discouraged that you couldn't tell anyone what you were thinking or what you needed. Well, that's what life was really like for a girl named Helen Keller. Helen Keller was born a long time ago, over 150 years ago. When she was a baby, she caught a disease that made her lose her eyesight and her hearing. For the rest of her life, Helen Keller was blind and deaf. Deaf means that she can't hear. Life was very hard for Helen Keller as she grew up. She became frustrated and angry because not only was she blind and deaf, she wasn't able to talk or communicate with other people. She felt sorry for herself and she was often mean to other people. When children tried to play with her, she broke their toys. One time she locked her mother in a room so she couldn't get out. At dinner time, Helen walked around the table sniffing everyone's food. If she smelled something she liked on someone's plate, she would grab it and gobble it up. Why do you think that Helen Keller was so mean when she was growing up? I think it was because she was frustrated. If you wouldn't be able to talk and you couldn't hear and you couldn't see, then that would be frustrating. Helen Keller felt her way through the world, touching and fumbling through the silent darkness. Her sense of touch, smell, and taste were her only connections to the world. As an adult, she remembered those days by saying, "I literally thought with my body." The only memories she had from those years were sensations. Sensations are like feelings. She remembers that when she was really upset, she used to run outside and bury her face in the cool leaves and grass. Guided by her sense of smell, she would make her way through the garden until she could smell the roses and the violets that calmed her down. Helen Keller's mother and father loved her very much, but because she could not understand the world, she seemed disobedient and hard to control. Disobedient means that she didn't listen and do what she was asked by her mom or dad. When she was 6, her parents hired a special teacher named Anne Sullivan to take care of Helen at home. When Anne Sullivan came to stay with the family, she figured out that Helen was behaving badly because she was frustrated and angry. Anne Sullivan knew that Helen could break out of her dark world if she learned to communicate with other people. But to communicate, Anne knew Helen would need to learn a lot of words. Anne Sullivan knew that because Helen couldn't hear or talk, she never learned what a word was. She started teaching Helen Keller words by using her fingers to write and spell them on the palm of Helen's hand. When Helen Keller splashed her hands with water, Sullivan took Helen's other hand and spelled out on her palm, water. W-A-T-E-R. And when Helen Keller pointed to herself, Sullivan spelled out in letters the word Helen. So she would, because she couldn't see a piece of paper, so if Anne was writing on a piece of paper, she couldn't see it, so she was spelling it out on her hand so that she could learn the letters, kind of like what we do, but she can't see them. So if she wanted to write an O, she would make an O on her palm like that. To Helen Keller, learning from Anne Sullivan was like being born a second time. Suddenly, the world was not so confusing. Helen later said, "I had been a little ghost in a no world. Now I knew my name. I was a person. I could understand people and make them understand me." For the first time, Helen had a way to tell people what she was thinking. When Helen wanted to speak to Anne, she wrote words on Anne's hand. However, it took a long time to spell out a whole sentence. Eventually, Anne taught Helen sign language so she was able to communicate more easily with others. Sign language is a special kind of language in which a person uses only their hands and fingers to make signs for letters and words. People using sign language to speak to people who are deaf or hearing impaired. For Helen Keller, however, there was an extra challenge since she could not see. She had to feel the other person's hand while they were making the sign in order to communicate using sign language. Okay, so look at these. These are all of the letters and how you put your hands in order to spell to kind of give a signal for the letters. So like if you wanted to say O to someone who was deaf, who couldn't hear, you would do this, O. If you were to do a P, you do it like this. Okay, so this is called sign language. Helen loved learning so much that Anne knew she would love reading books. Helen left home to go to a special school for blind children, and Anne Sullivan went with her. She learned to read books in Braille, a special kind of writing that uses raised dots on the page. Using Braille, Helen was able to read the words by feeling them with her fingertips. At school, she made a lot of friends and earned excellent grades. Helen was determined to succeed, and with Anne's help, she graduated from high school and college. That's awesome. Later in life, Helen Keller became a famous writer and speaker. In her books and speeches, she told the remarkable story of her life. People were amazed that Helen never gave up and was able to overcome the challenges of being both deaf and blind. I was just checking to see if I had a book in Braille, and I do somewhere. So maybe when I do my next video, I'll show you a book that has Braille in it. Braille is a way that blind people can read. So there are little bumps on the pages. They just trace their fingers over the bumps. Well, I guess you can kind of see it here. They trace their fingers over the bumps, and then they learn which bumps make which letters, and that's how they're able to read. Isn't that amazing that people have figured out how to teach people who can't see how to read? Kind of like Ray Charles. Remember, he can't see, but he can play the piano. So even though maybe some of our senses might be gone, we can still use our other senses to help us be successful in the world. Just a reminder, our senses are sight, smell, hearing, taste, touch. Very good. I'll talk to you tomorrow.